So what you're seeing at the moment is a seismic shift in the way in which world trade is being done. You're seeing a lot of trade moving digital. You're seeing a lot of trade moving into services, and you're seeing a huge nationalisation of trade as well. So a lot of trade being done more locally, and a lot more nationalistic and protectionist policies. This is likely, according to the World Trade Organization, to cause a drop in world trade of up to 32% this year. Nobody's completely sure, but Coriolis Technologies is estimating around 22% at least, in volume terms. So, I mean, there is a seismic shift, and this is really important in terms of the way in which trade is being done. What we're beginning to see is the localization of supply chains, and that's absolutely critical because nobody wants to see what happened at the beginning of this crisis, which was that people saw their inventories fall, they were dependent on one supplier, and therefore they couldn't get access to the things that they needed in order to keep world trade going.
I was surprised by the numbers you gave us. 95 countries imposing export restrictions on key medical and food-related goods, and you point out only Germany has implemented export liberalisation measures. Do you think this is a theme that is here to stay?
I think there's no normal to return to. Let's put it like that. I think what we've seen is world trade shift fundamentally, and going back to the point about supply chains, because countries don't want to be dependent on one supplier anymore. They've actually started to look to actually almost distribute their supply chains across the world. So people will be businesses will be looking to get all of their supplies from different places. And yes, I think this is here to stay. I don't think it's something that we will return to. I don't think it's the case that we will return to global growth through multilateral trade in the same way. There's still an underlying pressure towards that, and obviously the reforms of the World Trade Organization are a critical part of that.
Touch on the World Trade Organization. We've just run through a list of candidates all morning about who could be the next lead for the organization. How significant is the appointment this time round? Because I was debating whether it might be in the interest of the United States to have a weaker candidate lead the organization, because there may not be as much pushback, particularly if it's another Trump administration we're witnessing.
So the World Trade Organization has been a little bit like the League of Nations during the whole in the run up to the world wars. So it's been very powerless over the last few months to do anything. In fact, the last 18 months in terms of the US-China trade war. Now, I don't think we're going to see a huge difference whether Biden gets elected or whether Trump gets elected to the relationship between the US and China. But the role of the World Trade Organization is being talked about everywhere around the world. And I think the important point to make here is that everybody agrees that the World Trade Organization needs to change. So it's not something that people are disagreeing with, because it's unable to cope with disputes. It's become too litigious, which is what the Mexican candidate is saying. Africa pushing very strongly to have an African representative, to create greater trade in some of the emerging economies across the world and represent those interests. So there is a general move towards reform of the World Trade Organization, which actually everybody agrees with, but it's being driven by the United States, and the danger is that it's done entirely on US terms.